Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Enterprise Universe. We have Dr. Stalker with us today, who is obviously our the leader of the Enterprise Universe, scientist, inventor, entrepreneur. And for today's subject, we wanted to get back into one of the things that we talked about a little bit, which is differentiating between people and things in business. We have touched on this a couple of times, but I think it's very central to the enterprise universe. And I want to ask a few more questions, if possible, of you, Dr. Stoker, regarding how we differentiate between humans and things, and how we manage humans different from things.
That sounds great, Eamonn. Appreciate the introduction. Here is what's going to happen, right? When you are an entrepreneur, you're following these 9 fundamentals. We touched on 5 so far, and we'll come to the back 4. But at this point, I think I want to differentiate what an entrepreneur does versus how a business gets built, right? So you kind of go back and forth on that. So I want to kind of clear that now. So when you really come to the recipe fundamental, where I said 50% technology people, 30% business people, and 20 financial resource people that I talk about for the enterprise universe. So we have people now. It's not just the entrepreneur alone. There are other people that are helping him or her. In my case, they're helping me, and they're put into these various 3 buckets and so forth. So there is the business and the entrepreneur with his or her vision and the purpose, and puts a recipe together for success for his or her business. But what happens is when you have a business, it also has more than just people, right? You have buildings, computers, cash, and bills payable, accounts receivable, all of that stuff is going to be there. So lots of things too. But another thing too, in addition to these things external, internally, people are also attached to certain things. I may be attached to my religion. I may be attached to my country. I may be attached to my opinions. There are lots of things that are attached to by people. So when I talk to Eamonn is not just a pure thinking person. He's got some attachments with some ideas and so forth. And that's really the problem, where if I'm trying to lead Eamonn, and if I'm also trying to manage him, that would become a problem. So that's why Eamonn has to understand, within the enterprise universe, he is purely a thinking person, and he does not have to be attached to an external thing, whatever that might be. He might be coming to late to work, and that's an issue that the enterprise universe identifies. And when we talk to Eamonn about that, he's not going to get upset about it. He says, well, that's a problem that I need to work on. It has nothing to do with me. It does not define me. But if I improve on that, it's going to make me better contributor within the enterprise universe. So the leading concept, essentially, Eamonn, trying to detach people from things. No matter how attached they are, they should not be so attached to it, someone cannot lead them, simply because those things are coming in the way. But it sounds easy to say, but it's not easy to implement, because as human beings, we have been practicing these things for so many decades. It requires a lot of retraining, simply because leading human beings, managing things, is not easy unless that understanding is created among all of the folks within the enterprise universe.
And I think what you're saying is a precondition for being able to lead people is the fact that they have an ability to be realistic about their own attachments and to be free of those attachments, so they have the ears to listen, if you will, to the feedback that they're getting. Is that fair?
That's actually true. So what happens is this, there are managers out there that actually manage people. That's really a no-no. You should never, ever manage people. That's going to backfire on you so badly that you will realize you just made a big mistake. But if you don't manage things, that's not going to go anywhere too. So simply because you cannot actually lead things that are non-humans, right? So budget, you don't lead it. It has to be managed. But budget by a CPA, a finance person, might take it personally when you say, hey, look, there is an error here. Eamonn, you are the CFO for the company, but you made a mistake here, and Eamonn is going to take that personally. Instead
Yeah,
of
I
saying,
have
yeah,
struggled.
that's an error that I made, it's nothing to do with me, let's correct it. So that differentiation has to happen, attachment has to happen for people to be able to lead people and manage things at the same time. And that type of understanding can only occur within an organization after retraining them for so many
Mm.
months. Actually, I actually take this as a 12-month program on a monthly basis to do it right. But what happens is this, Eamon, if you have this inability within an organization, the way it exhibits itself in that organization is leadership deficit. So, and when you have leadership deficit within the organization, that organization is not excelling. It's really coming in its own way. And you have to start realizing that and then detaching that the things from human beings and then start training.
All right. I think, I certainly understand that. I think this is very interesting because it speaks to the whole idea that we start with the individuals and their attachments and opening them up to the feedback. I have struggled a lot with this, um, primarily because my experience is it's very difficult to have a mature conversation with people about, people are easily hurt. They're entrenched in their ways. They lack trust. It feels to me, and I don't know whether you agree, but the economy has essentially been in low productivity for quite a long time, and perhaps the root of this is this issue of we're not getting the most out of our human resources. There's been, in a sense, a fundamental breakdown. So therefore, we're not the lack of productivity is, in a sense, a measure of the lack of engagement we have by people in their jobs in a fundamental sense.
Lack of productivity is essentially one of the manifestations of leadership deficit within an organization. And I point that back to the fact that people are not able to separate themselves from things, and leaders within those organizations are not able to understand the difference. So they're trying to manage people too, because people are identifying themselves with things. And you talked about dealing with people as objects. You know, you've talked about that many, many times. And that's because of that. It's because of the differentiation. But Eamon, I'm not saying this is easy. It is actually not an easy thing to do because you have to have a solid understanding of what you want to do organizationally. You have to create the value set that you need for your organization. Maybe 10 things, maybe 20 things, but you list them all and you get everyone within your organization, CEO down to the janitor, on the same page. You just cannot do it with a few people within your circle. It has to be adopted by everyone within the organization. And they know, for example, you say coming to work late is never excused. Let's just say that as a organizational goal. Everyone knows that from CEO down to the janitor that coming to late to work is not accepted within this organization. As an example, I'm not saying that's true within the enterprise universe, but once you have that goal, if Eamon is coming late, your colleagues will have to be able to point it out, and you would have to accept it and start working toward it instead of getting really defensive about it simply because the environment that we create is going to allow you to actually long for that type of criticism because you really truly want to get better in that organization.
Yes, and I think that is I had a conversation about this today where businesses don't have the capability because of the leadership gap, and I believe because the workforce is essentially in an adversarial relationship with the leadership.
That happens a lot.
So I guess the key thing is to actually relieve that. One has to get over like the adversarial. I think there's I just don't want to pretend that there isn't adversarial issues one typically has to get over as well. It's not always easy to address, but there are resentments in the organization that may be long-standing, and to get over that so that people can take a new step forward, positive step forward, is not easy.
Well, it's a huge commitment, Eamonn. Once you really figure out the 5 things or 10 things that your organization wants to clean up, and that has to be accepted by each and every individual within your organization. It's just not a few C-level people or mid-level managers. No, everyone actually, including the janitor, they are on the same page there with respect to those 5 things or 10 things. And then you start working together. So there's no resentment, there is no misunderstanding. But as I also pointed out in our last session, those rules have to be understood by everyone. So that way your colleague who may be mean to you is trying to pick on you. That's not going to happen in the case where it's fully understood by everyone. So CEO is not taking advantage of it. Some mid-level managers are not taking advantage of their subordinates and so forth, because it has to be understood by everyone across the entire organization.
And that means that essentially what you're saying is people have to be transparent, and there has to be a set of norms within the organization that everybody adheres to. Otherwise, it's not really going to work.
Absolutely, it's true. Within the enterprise universe, Eamonn, my vision for it, the way I see happening is those who are not transparent, those who get defensive about their attachments, those who are unable to lead other people, they're going to stick out as a sore thumb because they will be just one and only one, perhaps, maybe not more than a handful. The rest of them are doing great together, they're helping. And I don't believe in, of course, picking on somebody myself as the CEO of this organization, whoever is falling behind because of lack of resources or maybe lack of understanding. I'll work with them closely. I won't say, hey, Eamonn, you did not do this, and we tried and you failed, you are out. I would never say that. I would actually take it upon myself to say, if Eamonn hasn't improved on this, there's something wrong with the organization. We have not provided the resources that he needs. So I'm going to double those efforts to make sure that you are going to get better.
I think that there is also the possibility, James, that we're pretty dyed in the wool as far as our behaviors are concerned. I can only speak for myself and say that I'm not quite sure, even myself, when I'm being authentic versus inauthentic, because I'm so used to selling and so used to being in the commercial world that there's a certain, there seems to be, at least to me, I strive for authenticity. I strive for being authentic, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a challenge there.
Oh, there is a lot of challenge. Of course, I'm talking about the 9 fundamentals I could actually talk about within seminars. They don't have to have rigorous training per se, but for the leading environment, they do need training, hands-on training. They have to go back and forth. They have to do some homework. This could only be done within a year if you're really studious about it, because otherwise it's going to take even longer. So these are not just ideas. You have to retrain yourself. You have to.
And I think that's the key point, is that it may be unconscious to us the degree to which we're you know, this is going to take some deprogramming, and I speak for myself that you know, it's a part of being a successful businessman is that you're in a sales mode quite a lot, and that can, it's not hard for that to trip over into the line of manipulation. I know there's an authentic sales mode, but there's also a kind of a manipulation thing that can go on, and we need to kind of keep it as much as possible in the authentic realm, it feels like, rather than the you know, the inauthentic. And I'm not sure we are, because we're not necessarily used to being operating in this way. I think it's going to take a little bit of getting used to.
I have an idea about the sales process itself, Eamon. I'm going to touch on this for in the customer segment for the 9 fundamentals that will come for the back 4. So we are not going to approach sales like what we have been doing, and I think we have done it in the wrong way. But let's stay on the topic about the leading and splitting and detaching people from things, and you manage people with kindness. That's my way of doing it. Of course, you may find something else. I want to lead people kindly, but I want to manage things ruthlessly at the same time. So that requires a special skill for people. So I'm not a leader, I'm not a manager, but I'm a mixed bag of both. I have to be able to do. I can only do that when I'm able to detach my own things from myself, my being. So I'm not attached to some things. And if I am, then I'm not able to objectively figure out what's best for my folks. And I will not be able to lead them if I have my own attachments guiding me. And that's why it requires a lot of training on myself, which I have done over the years. So I wasn't really wasting my time when I'm developing all these different technologies and so forth. I have been working on myself, and that's part of knowing yourself too, one of the other fundamentals. But so, let me say this. Let me say this, Eamon. When you're able to detach it and lead people with kindness and manage things ruthlessly at the same time, when that organization understands, all the people understand, everyone is pulling for each other to make them better and make themselves better. In my view, as a physicist, they achieve resonance, meaning it's bigger than some of the parts. That resonance is only possible when the organization elevates itself to that level. And that's really what one has to do. Otherwise, you will be looking at leadership deficit. And if I could say it now, Eamon, any organization, political, business, government, you name it, they have leadership deficit simply because of this fundamental flaw.
Yes, and I can, but so we're looking for resonance. I think if we take that metaphor of resonance, there is an idea then of some kind of a harmonic or harmony that is achieved by people kind of operating at the same frequency, if you will, and kind of getting jiving. So I like that idea of one has to have a certain amount of freedom in order to oscillate. So I think that that makes a lot of sense to me as a metaphor. I suspect that would you be looking for people then to select themselves out when they're not willing or they can't resonate or they're not willing to free up into this. So I guess, you know, if you're not a fit, you would just you would say that people will probably just drop out. Is that the case?
That's not necessarily the case, because once they're in, I want to make sure they're going to be in for the long haul. Of course, you know, they're open. They could go leave anytime they want. But as far as I'm concerned, if they are not able to perform at that level, it's an indication that I have not done a good job as the leader of the organization, or the rest of the people too. I'm not just the only person that's doing it. So the rest of the people are not able to offer him or her the tools necessary, the environment necessary. So that's where the learning comes into play. Another fundamental of the organization, where you have seminars, talks, all kinds of exposure that people get to have within their departments and teams and so forth. So everyone that really is struggling to get better, then they will have the resources to go to, including me, and I will be spending more time with them, no matter what level they are. I will not say, hey, no, Eamon, we cannot deal with him. We tried, and let's let him go. I would never
But
do that.
isn't like, to take the sporting analogy, if you want a team to resonate at a certain frequency and get a lot done, some people just can't make the cut, James. They don't have they don't have the discipline, they don't have the innate skills. Like, I can't see how you can't have a very high performing team without some aspect of people not cutting it, or basically having to drop out for whatever reasons.
But there's a flip side too. I understand, practically speaking, that's true, but there's a flip side to it too, Eamon. No matter how good people are, when you put them together, there will be friction. Okay, it's up to the leadership to be able to isolate those issues and then try to solve them. So all I'm saying is, you say, well, Eamon, we can't deal with him, and we get somebody else. What if that happens again? Because human beings are human beings. They have attachments to things. They have their personal goals that may not gel with the overall goal of the organization. All I'm saying is a leadership team has to prepare themselves to be able to deal with all of them, no matter what the situation is. Of course, at some point you would say, yeah, it may not be the right thing for both of us, then we'll walk away from each other. But you will have to do everything you can. At least I'm going to do everything I can, and I make sure the enterprise universe is going to offer all of the tools necessary for all.
So let me just be there's a lot of work to be done. It seems to, I think I'm not alone in saying that it feels like we're in a very important point in history. We face some incredible challenges right now. Whether it's polar melting, whether it's loss of biodiversity, whether it's all of these kind of things. We want to leave the world a little bit of a better place for our kids. It feels like we have to if the enterprise universe has got this important mission to contribute to solving and making the world a better place, it's not going to work. You're just not going to be able to get everybody on board. You're going to have to make some hard decisions about who's on board, who's contributing, because it's not business as usual. We've got a lot of things to get done. How are you going to make those kind of hard decisions if we're trying to save everybody along the way? I'm just asking where does the mission, where does caring for the people and getting the most out of them? I totally understand that. But also there's the mission. It has to get fulfilled. There's important work to be done. And I understand we want people to grow and people to prosper. But there is a point at which we've got to get the work done too, if we're to achieve the goals of the purpose of the TEU. And then you've got this conflict between the purpose of the TEU and the person and the individual, and we're trying to wrestle the two. How do we resolve that issue?
Well, Eamon, you're bringing some practical aspects to this, and I totally understand it. But here is what happens. Talents and all, that's great. I don't say those are not needed. But above and beyond talents, one has to work hard to be able to gel with the enterprise universe and undergo the training and streamline their or align their own purpose with that of the organization. But here is what happens. Hard work comes from the desire. The stronger the desire you have, the harder you're going to work. So I'm not going to expect individuals to develop, somehow generate that desire themselves. It has to come from everyone else within the organization, including myself. So that desire, that inspiration has to be given by the people within the organization. And if they are not able to catch up and then do the hard work, then it's really somehow reflective of our group as a collective entity. So that's really what I'm saying. So we will make some hard decisions, there's no doubt about it, but not before we try everything possible to make that happen. Because here is the reason: no matter who replaces them, Eamon, they will have their own baggage. So we cannot simply say, hey, I can't deal with you, you're out. You get somebody else, they get in with their own baggage, you have to deal with it. What I'm saying is the leadership team has to be able to deal with anything that's thrown at them while not missing out on the mission. So there are some mission critical people that have already undergone through all of the training. They are there solid while we're training and educating others to get to that level. So
Well,
it's
I
more of
think,
a phased
maybe
in
where
approach.
I've gone off base here is, as I've listened to you, is that there's lots of roles in the enterprise universe, and there will be places for everybody with every skill set, as long as they have the desire and as long as they're aligned to the purpose, there will be a place for them. And I think that's what you're saying. And I guess, and that may preclude like that may not mean that they ride in the highest levels of the universe, the enterprise universe, but they'll be able to find a contributing role. I think where I was just coming from was that you know I totally love the idea. I think it's great. It's been such a challenge in my career to get the people to resonate, to create that gel. It's really been a tremendous. And we I think all of us in our career, we've had moments where we've worked with individuals and we've worked with teams where we were rolling and we were getting it done and we were aligned. But it tends to be something of a it's not as often. I think people would think back on their careers and they can count maybe on one hand the number of times they were involved in a team that was really resonating and focused, and there was a common desire to achieve. And I think that's been lacking a little bit in corporate culture over the years.
Two things, Eamon. One, you're uncertain about your own ability to lead people because you got your own detachments and so forth. So you're unsure about your ability. That's one thing. But the other thing too, from the other side, they may not have evolved in that know thyself fundamental. So that's think about that. So it's a two-way street. Somebody's
Yes, it
leading.
is, and I don't deny that I've work to do. I think it's definitely, but I've also found it hard to meet people where they are, and I think this what you're suggesting is that we all know ourselves, and then we can engage in a process of mutual understanding, so we can get into resonance. It's not always easy to have those types of. I think you're right. You need a process for the group to work through to get to that point.
I,
It's you know
it's not easy. All of the ideas that I presented so far, none of them is easy. There's no way you could say they're easy. You have to work at them. There's no way. But if you really want to resonate as an organization or shine as an individual entrepreneur, you have to solidify your 9 fundamentals, which we haven't talked the last 4. But organizationally speaking, you have to have this leadership quality where your environment is not leading environment, it is a leading environment. And making sure you have a clear value set for your organization. I'm not saying what their value set should be. The enterprise universe has its own, but anybody could develop their own value set and get everyone within your organization on board with that and develop the rules and make sure those rules are followed. Nobody's misusing them. That requires a lot of training, right from CEO down to the low level people. So That's not an easy thing, I'm telling you. But if you want to resonate, if you want to perform at a high level, but I'm not even talking about capital performance, how much profit you're making and so forth. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is how happy your people are. How much are they happy being part of your organization? When they're happy, they're going to make your customers happy. When your customers happy, you're going to get a lot more feedback, perhaps even profits too, but as a secondary matter. So you're not really chasing money without really doing any of this. When you do that, your organization has huge deficit, leadership deficit that shows up in a lot of different ways that you don't want to think about. And you name any company, Eamon, I can show leadership deficit simply because of this fact, this fundamental nature of human beings being attached to things. And then when somebody tries to manage that thing, they think you're managing me. Instead of saying, okay, I like that thing, but it's different from me. So when you're managing that thing, you're not managing me. We are together managing that thing. That's really what the mindset has to be within the leading environment.
Right, and that's this, like, I think there's a philosophical, again, idea here of detachment and who am I, who's watching, who's there's this idea of I am not, like, we live in a we so often believe ourselves to be things, and we are what we manage, or we are what we own, and to be able to detach from that and then have a relationship that's to the things that are being managed is it's a shift in how people perceive themselves. It's a little bit like, the analogy is I live in the big house. I am my house. I was watching the thing on Richard Burton the other night, and he said, yeah, I know people who have hundreds of millions of pounds. This was back in the 80s. And he said, they're all afraid of losing all their money. And it's like, it's like, wow. You know what I'm saying? It's like, wow. Are you your money, or are you you? And it's back to this kind of, I think there's a lot there. There's a lot there around knowing what you are, and knowing that you're not the money, for example, if you're a rich person, or knowing you're not the, so that's, I think it's a very profound thing. I think it's great. And it's always, one of the things I love about our conversations, Dr. Stalker, is it's always a kind of a surprise, because I always go in thinking about it one way and I end up coming out thinking about it another. So it's like, I think when I came in, I think there's, I've come out now with a different perspective of, really getting down to that idea of it is all about, I think it's linked to what you just said about the knowing yourself, and, the thing versus I, and there's a lot of profound, you know, growing up to do to really embrace that. We're all children, I guess, and there's a lot more for us to do. So
Well, I appreciate this, Eamon, and I'll tell you this: I'm a hardcore philosopher.
yeah,
Don't ever forget that fact. I am. But how I differ, or where I differ with all of the other philosophers, is this: they were philosophers pursuing their own knowledge to the end of time. That's really what they wanted to do. They enjoyed it. They felt good about themselves, so they pursued for the long haul. I'm not like that. I'm somebody who wants to see the end points of anything, including philosophy. But once I get there, I want to make sure that philosophy is helpful to everyone else. That's where you see the
yes,
practical
yeah,
matters being
you see
introduced.
that, right? And you get to this, how far are you away, as you say, the delta between you and reality, and the bigger the delta, the more difficult it is for you to have the kind of positive impact that we need to be having these days. We need to close that delta, so there is the assumption that by closing the delta we'll be more effective in the world, and we'll be able to lead and manage and operate. But you keep coming back to. I can see that you keep coming back to this closing the gap, closing the reality gap, is a key idea, and it's all coming back to me, the subject, and the experience I have, and whether I have a real is my experience accurate? Do I have an accurate understanding of reality or not? And that's very much about this subject-object experience thing. It just keeps clattering around in my head that you keep coming back to that, knocking me. It's like, no, come back to, we're closing the gap. You need to be aware of who you are, what the object is. You're going to have these emotional reactions to things because you're mixing yourself up with the thing that we're discussing, and there's an emotional reaction, and that's getting in the way of us, you growing up to understand yourself better, and us, by the way, getting the job done. So I think that's part of what you're saying.
Absolutely true, Eamon. And here is what it is. The delta might look like a mountain for anyone. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? This such a huge thing I have to climb. When am I going to do? It's really not that hard. But where it starts is the realization that you have that delta and you want to work for it, and you create that desire. I'm telling you, once you create the desire, climbing that mountain becomes much easier.
Right.
And how do you get the desire? Of course, you get inspired by a lot of people, including the organization and your colleagues and many other folks outside of the organization. I mean, you draw inspiration from a lot of people, but at some point, as you do more of it, you want to inspire others too from your own experiences, because inspiration begets desire. Desire makes you work harder, and climbing that mountain makes it fun. Actually, I can't tell you enough how fun it is. And that's how much fun I've had all my life, simply because I'm climbing, closing the gap. And I'll tell you someday where I actually spend a lot of my time. I'm on the other side of that objective reality. I'm trying to refine that objective reality as I know it. I've done that for physics. I could do that for many other fields. But I have to climb to that level first, and it's become easier for me because I've done it so many times.
Right.
But it would be easier for everyone too, as they put their mind to get inspired and start the desire and start working hard.
And using the analogy of climbing the hill, we're going to have to leave all our baggage at the bottom of the hill, or as we go up the hill, we've got to, I think the baggage we have in our back makes it hard to climb the hill. So we have to get rid of the baggage as we walk up the hill. And even if we end up at the top of the hill in our shorts, that's okay, because we're a little bit closer to reality. So I think that's I'm pushing that analogy a bit too far there, but
no, it's actually a fantastic analogy. I like that. That's true, because the more baggage you have, the less energy you will have to climb, because you're carrying all that weight. So it's absolutely a good analogy, and people have to work at it. Of course,
it's kind of like a lot of taking. Maybe I don't need to take the pots and pans up the hill. Maybe they could be left behind. So, anyways, we're at our time, Dr. Stalker, as usual. As I say, one of the hallmarks of dealing with the super intelligent folks is that it's always surprising. The conversation's always surprising, and I value that a lot. Which is, it's never what I expect, which I think it's really great.
I appreciate that, Eamon. And we're going to do great things. And I know the challenges that we have in the world are only growing, mostly interpersonal relations among countries and among leaders and so forth. So there's a whole lot that the Enterprise Universe is going to do along those lines. And I'm excited about that for not only myself, but everyone else that's going to be part of the Enterprise Universe.
Perfect. Okay, folks, thanks a lot for checking in with us again. We're excited to have you with us, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon. And Dr. Stalker, maybe we'll pick up again on your foundational principles the next time we chat.
Yes,
I'm
we'll
certainly
do
very interested to hear more about all that. Thanks so much, everybody, and I'm sure everybody else is too. Great. Thanks so much. God bless. Bye.